Crash on the beat.
Paper chaser.
What's going on, everybody? My name is JP. Appreciate y'all tuning in. It's another episode of Chopping It Up with JP. I'm your host, JP Wiafi. Now, I am so excited for this particular episode. Been working on this content and making sure that it's something that everybody can listen in on and kind of relate, and basically we're going to be getting into money. Financial literacy, circulation and creation of the dollar. And we're going to be, dissecting some of the myths that are always surrounding this topic because, we all know money makes the world go around, and every time we are, encountering money or we touching money, like, it's basically a tool, right? It's a tool. It gives us access. It can be harmful, it can be helpful, and I really want us to get into it and have a better understanding of what it is, and so that we could be better off, right? Because, there are so many question marks around money. We just know that it's going to get us someplace eventually, right? But you want to buy a house, you need money. You want to buy a car, you need money. Clothes, shoes. Take your girlfriend out to a nice date, some dinner, some, you know what I'm saying, movie theater, money, money, money. You know what I'm saying? If you want some Jordans, come on. Them things is like not less than $120, something like that, right? So, I really want us to get into it. And before we get into the content, if you can just please drop a like and a subscribe to my channel. It's really going to help me grow and help me reach out to more of the community and really get the word out. And I really appreciate y'all that have been tuning in weekly, and this is really going to help me out. So appreciate y'all, and let's get into it. So I want to start off with this question right now. Without Googling it, without, getting a book on it, if you don't already know this, how is money made in America? Just think about that for a second. How is it that money is made in some secret location somewhere and it ends up in your pocket at the end of the day? Now, it's tough, right? Because if you're the average American, you don't know. All you know is that you got to go get a job. You got to make a business. You got to make a profit somehow, but you don't really know how we get to that point, right? Where the money is coming from. And I got another question for you. What makes up our dollar? What backs up our dollar? Now, chances are, like I said, if you're an average person, you don't know either. So I really want us to dive into, these interesting topics, and so we can be smarter about money and where it comes from and how it circulates. And yeah. All right. So the creation of the U.S. dollar, right? The U.S. dollar, well, previously it was backed by gold, right? Back in the day, before the 1930s, you could go into the bank and exchange a certain amount of dollars for a gold brick that was inside of the bank. And that's how the economy was flowing. And, prior to that point, what was everybody coming to California for? Gold, you know what I'm saying? To seek riches. And that's how the U.S. economy was sustained. Now, just a little history lesson for y'all. One of the greatest American stock market crashes was in 1929. It was referred to as the Great Crash, or the Wall Street stock market crash of 1929. And it was a major crash, and it basically lasted a little under 2 months. And it lasted from September to October. And during that time, shares on the New York Stock Exchange plummeted. Now, without, getting too into it, basically that depression lasted around 10 years. And after that, they decided, we got to do something better. We got to do something different. We need a more reliable drive or economic backing system so that we don't run into depressions and trouble like this. So instead of making their dollar relied upon anything physical or tangible, they made it into something that was much more efficient, yet much more fake. I'm going to say that one more time. They made it much more efficient, much more fake. And I'm going to tell you exactly why. So I think this was in 1933 is when they first implemented this system of fiat money. People don't know what fiat means. Fiat means fake. It also means a Latin term for so let it be done. You can go on ahead and do your research on that. FIAT, fiat money. And this fiat money, also known as fiat currency, was basically backed by whatever they said it was going to be backed by. As funny as that sounds, that's exactly true. They created the dollar or recreated the dollar so that the dollar amount wouldn't be relied upon anything physical. It would be whatever you're willing to put the value on it, whatever the market sets it to be. So what does that translate into? The dollar, instead of being worth, one gold bar, is now worth a good or service that you're willing to pay. So now, instead of, like I said, a gold bar being for like $1, $1 is going to be a candy bar. Or $1 is going to be a pencil from 99-cent store, right? So let's use bigger numbers. $100 is going to be a pair of shoes, right? Sneakers. $200, $300, $400, gaming system, console, whatever you want to talk about. Whatever you think is about to be $300, $400, even a new camera. Yep. That's exactly how our system is designed. Or if you want to relate it to services, here's how it's going to look. You hire a contractor to do some work done on your yard. The contractor then assesses the amount of time and the materials that are going to be used and the labor that is involved for the entire project. He looks at he assesses the project, he assesses the job, then he goes back to tell you it's going to cost $1,000. That's literally how our system is made up, right? Very good. If you don't understand it, I'm going to explain one more concept that will probably help you out even more. If you own a phone, most likely it's an iPhone or an Android. I'm going to go with iPhone because I have an iPhone and I frankly think that iPhones are better. However, for somebody out in Bangladesh or Thailand or even Africa or Sierra Leone, or specifically where they find a lot of minerals for their batteries, probably not, right? An iPhone today on the market, let's look at maybe an iPhone 11, right? The newest one I think is just that came out that is the 11. So an iPhone 11, I think the last time I saw the price, it was like $1,000, right? Which is absurd. That's utterly ridiculous. But Apple set the price at a certain standard, and because I want that iPhone 11, like Max or Pro or whatever it is, that then becomes the price. Does that make sense? Like that then becomes the market value. It didn't cost them $1,000 to make the phone, but because they have put the standard, or they have set the standard as X amount of dollars, I then am willing to pay X amount of dollars because I want that product, good or service. Now, does that make sense? right? We don't really know, but it up to this point, it has been extremely efficient. No matter who it's hurting, no matter who's not benefiting from the system, capitalism has functioned so efficiently and so it's like a well-run oil machine that you just set and correct every now and again, honestly. And that's the kind of system that allows for different things to be invested in, like stocks, bonds, which I'll get into later, treasury checks, which I'll be discussing on part 2 of this episode. So stay tuned for that, and so on and so forth, right? So that explains how it's created and how it basically is backed. Now we're going to get into the cycle of how it basically shows up in your bank account after you get paid, all the way coming from the U.S. government, right? So the U.S. government is primarily made of bonds. Careful, I said made, not backed by or created by. It's made of bonds. For those of you that don't know what bonds are a promise to repay a certain amount of dollars within a certain amount of time, right? The government issues the bonds and sells them to the Federal Reserve, who then buys them with newly created money. I just explained to you what money is, right? So now the Federal Reserve buys these bonds. Now, as they're buying these bonds, they are issuing a check under their own name, and therefore buying the bond, which is a promise to pay back a certain amount of money within a certain amount of time, then prompts the newly created dollars, causing purchasing power of all other dollars to decrease. Right? Which technically doesn't make sense, because that's like saying I'm going to give you $1 million, and that's with interest. And once you take that $1 million, you're going to spend it all at once and then buy back more money while you're still paying interest off of the money that I just gave you. Confusing, right? That's capitalism for you. Let's continue. Now, officially, the way that the government makes their money is off of tax, because any dollar that the U.S. spends is eventually going to come out of your pocket. I know it sucks. I know it's sad, but that's the kind of government that we function under. No matter what kind of, you see the military funding is, you know what I'm saying, like the highest in the world. And we spend, I think it's like $12,000 or a little less than that per student, or at least they say, in education, right? Which I think that adds up to, I think the number the last time I looked at it was like $8.12 trillion, right? Which seems like a lot, but then you go and look at something like military funding, and that's like 637 billion. You know what I mean? So, I mean, like that's literally your money. That whenever you hear that phrase, "Oh, my hard-earned money at work," that's exactly what that means. Now, granted, people don't really know how that works, but like I said, every time that the government spends money, it's most likely going to come out of your pocket in one shape or another. It may not be now, but it will be later, and that's just how it works. Now, going back to the topic of the U.S. dollar, let's look at how the U.S. dollar performs compared to other dollars, right? I mentioned before that newly created dollars cause purchasing power of all other dollars to decrease. And that is literally because the U.S. dollar position is far reaching to foreign markets, therefore causing inflation and making the U.S.'s dollar much more powerful than the euro or the Japanese yen or British pound sterling or cedis or naira or the Pakistani rupees, right? So on and so forth. So, in some ways, going out into market, that's a good thing. But the way that that's a drawback for you, the citizen, is that every time newly money, since it's created based on debt, as the U.S. debt increases, your debt increases. Right? Which can only mean that once the debt is repaid on the bond, it literally ceases to exist. Make that mental connection. I'm going to say it one more time. Once the debt is repaid on a bond in the U.S., it literally ceases to exist, which means that it's literally fiat. It's up in the air. It's gone. You can't see it anymore. All you have is just the record of it. So, quick recap. Bonds and loans equal debt, right? Bonds and loans are literally instruments of currency, right? Like they're effectively assets, if you will, based off of debt, right? And money in the US is whatever you want it to be. So whatever the market sets it out to be. And that's how we've been going for just under 100 years now. So we'll see where that leads us. Now, how is it that the government gets that money and it ends up in your pocket? For those of y'all that don't know, federal income tax is basically tax that's taken from the IRS out of your annual earnings. Usually it's like from your paycheck, or if you have like capital gains, you know what I'm saying? But most likely it's from your paycheck. And that's how that system is then given to the government. That's how they're able to use your money to whatever they see fit, essentially. And I forgot to mention this earlier, but the Federal Reserve is the central banking system for the government. It's the central banking system. The government isn't going to go to like Chase or Goldman Sachs or Lehman Brothers. You know what I'm saying? They're not going to go to like Bank of America or Wells Fargo with their money. No. If only they could go to One United Bank, which is actually a black-owned bank. Y'all should do more research into them. But not about them. They're not going to go to any of those other banks. Why? Because as much money as those banks control, they're not big enough for the federal government. Okay? So the Federal Reserve is essentially the bank of all banks. They basically determine how much a bank can hold on to based on their cash reserves or deposits. Right? So think about this big picture. Right? We got the Federal Reserve. We got big banks, investing banks like Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, like I mentioned, Morgan Stanley. Right? Then you got the banks that they then own, which are, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. But anyway, you got those banks that they then own. And then there's corporate banks. And then from there is what those banks then own. And what do most banks own? Land. Most banks own land, right? So anytime that somebody wants to start a business, what do they have to do? They have to register their business. And right after that, they have to own the space. And where are most spaces that are for sale? Usually under banks, right? They go to the bank. They go and get a loan. They get a loan based on, their business model, however they're approved or not approved. They get the loan. They start, they buy the piece of land, whether that's however many acres, they build it, or just if they have, profitability already, they go out and get their own building, and then boom. Thus is born Fortune 500 business. Now, of course, is it ever that simple? No. Some corporations like auto corporations, Ford, Dodge, General Motors, Mercedes-Benz, right? These corporations have money that's literally passed down. So for literally 100 years, right, they have profitability, and they keep that money circulating, producing a certain amount of cars or services within that certain amount of time, right? So then they come out and buy a piece of land. They meaning business, not just, auto corporations. They come out, they try and get a piece of land. The business is born. And who do they employ? You or somebody else in another country because of outsourcing, right? So that's basically how you funnel down money from the government down to you. Pretty interesting, right? Yeah, well, I mean, it gets it is complex, but if you look at capitalism for what it is, it runs so efficiently that it's like a three-headed dragon. You can't really just attack one facet of capitalism. And I'm going to circle right back to that after I cover this, just to make sure y'all know, right? Although, the U.S. has all this money, which is apparently fiat currency, and, I'm sure you have questions like, why do we have a system based on money that doesn't exist? Or how is it that we're able to make a profit at the end of the day if the dollars in our bank account are essentially fake, right? So I'm going to break down, how the dollars literally circulate first by class. I'll break down by race, but first by class. And I'm going to circle back to what I was saying in just a moment as well. So wealth disparities, right? I'm sure everybody's heard about the top 1%, and they don't really know what that means or what kind of number that looks like. But there is a top 1%. There's an elite class. And unlike every other society that came before us, our elite class of wealthy people, they literally have so much money that the only way that they could lose out or to keep from making a gain is to give it all out. They have mastered capitalism so well, you could argue that they created it, right? So what does that then do for people like me, the average person? That then makes wealth hard to attain. Makes it extremely difficult. Is that an excuse? No, it's a math game. It's numbers, right? So let's look at some key statistics here. Wealth disparities. Let's look at 1989, right? That's probably people in 1989 are about 30, right? Around 30, 31 by now. So in 1989, right? The bottom 90% in 1989, U.S. population, and I quote, held 33% of all wealth. 33%. Which means that the top 10% had 67% of wealth. That's all. That's how that works, right? So that's already one inequality right there. Then by 2016, the bottom 90% only held 23% of all wealth within the U.S. What does that look like today? Around 85% of families have wealth below the mean. The mean is usually about $690,000 per household, essentially, right? During the course of your employment, during the course of your career, that's essentially how much you would make, right? 6 figures. Fine, not bad, right? Okay. Going back to 2016, up to that point, top 1% had about a 30% increase. Now, what does that mean for you and me? Is that it's extremely and exceedingly difficult to tap in to that upper class right there, to that elite, super elite class, right? However, it doesn't mean that it's unattainable. Now, you could always question the means of getting, that amount of money, right? Like, there's always going to be shady people doing shady stuff. That's what we've been doing from jump, right? But the difference between us and that super elite class is that, let's say we have a family of 4. That difference between the super elite class and, let's say, a lower middle class person is that lower middle class person most likely came up in the American education system and incurred what? Debt. They incurred debt through purchasing a home. If they own a home, automatically you're incurring debt. Number 2, they came up through the American education system. Boom, right there, debt. In the form of what? Loans. Whether unsubsidized, subsidized, they still have loans that they're going to have to pay back. Now, who do they get married to? Unless it's Kylie Jenner, you get lucky, right? You marry somebody famous or rich or wealthy. They marry somebody who they then have to incur their debt as well, right? Because their money becomes your money becomes their money once you get married. So you get married, boom, have the wedding, happy family, right? Y'all are in so much debt up to this point that y'all literally have to spend your life paying this back. Crazy, right? Nobody ever thinks of it that way, but that's essentially what's going on. That super elite class is never going to have their son or daughter go to school and have to incur debt. Why? Because they're going to pay it out of pocket. They pay for school out of pocket. They send their kids to school. They make sure that they know the ins and outs of the business that they're taking care of, then place them in the business that they took care of for their entire career, thus creating generational wealth and so on and so forth. Now, it's really a game. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're doing their absolute best to keep it within themselves. Why you think you never see an owner of a Fortune 500 company that has investors from all over the world? You never see their son, who is most likely going to take over the business, married to a person of a different race. You hardly ever see that. Why? Because they stress the importance of generational wealth, and they do that at such an extremely efficient rate that they keep the family name together. Now, if you don't believe me or you think I'm, giving you false information, let's look at some famous family names, right? Let's look at some of the wealthiest families. The Walton family. That's our first family that we're going to be checking out. Y'all have probably never heard of this family, right? But what does this family own? They own Walmart. The founder was Sam Walton. Sam Walton now owns, or he created Walmart, and that has been the biggest retailer for, I want to say, upwards of 50 years in America, right? They have Walmart. I don't even know how many different countries, maybe 30 or 40 countries. And they have something like 10,000 stores total, something like that. Then we look at the Cook family. We don't have to get too much into them, but what do they own? Lots of trust in oil. Next is the Mars family, right? And they literally rake in $30 billion annually. And the Mars company is entirely owned by the family. They don't make their company shares public, right? So even if they want to buy into the company, you can't, right? Or people can't, because they've literally kept it within themselves. For those of y'all that don't know exactly what Mars sells, they sell candies like Snickers, Three Musketeers, Milky Way, Twix, M&Ms, Dove chocolate even. Right. Y'all bougie people that be eating Dove and stuff, you ain't eating nothing but some Snickers. All right. Anyway, real smart. Like, I get that it's not fair, right? But if you look at making your family richer and keeping that money within that generation, do what the Mars did. Literally kept the money within the family and didn't sell it to anybody. With that business model, how could you ever go wrong? And the last family we're going to look at is S.C. Johnson. Hold on. Let me see if I can get it right. S.C. Johnson, a family company. S.C. Johnson, right? This family, they are very, very smart. This family literally specializes on cleaning supplies and on consumer chemicals. So anytime that you're about to use any cleaning agents, it's most likely owned by S.C. Johnson. Anytime that you're about to use baby powder, most likely owned by S.C. Johnson. Right? So what do all of these families have in common? Is that they're all privately run. They might have like a board of directors, but everybody who has controlling interest in the company, they're all family. You know what I'm saying? That is literally the creation of the top 1%, is those families. Now, there's obviously more families, right, that we could get into, but those are some of the most profitable ones in America. It's tough, right? But that's why it's so important to buy within your own communities. People that we're seeing nowadays are trying their hardest to become billionaires. You know? Now, how are these people who are, trying to become billionaires going to become billionaires, right? After all, there's a certain amount of wealth that can be circled within an economy. So how are they going to do that? We're going to take a look at some other people who attain wealth, right? Look at someone like Bill Gates, obviously, founder of Microsoft. He, I'm not gonna lie, he does kind of he weird, but I'm keeping my eye on him. Anyway, founder of Microsoft, incredibly brilliant guy, computer software entrepreneur, one of the most wealthiest billionaires that I know. Next, Warren Buffett, right? Investment salesman. He could probably sell you the shoes that you already own. Jeff Bezos, y'all should know, especially with everybody buying stuff off of Amazon today. He's the CEO of Amazon. Amazon, Fortune 500 company, one of the most profitable, and probably going to be the most profitable company probably in human history, to be honest, right? And then we got Mark Zuckerberg. Like I said, very smart, brilliant young man. Like I said, very brilliant, smart young man, CEO of Facebook. Facebook blew up, right? Facebook blew up, but what Facebook did that put them over the hump, that probably kept them from going lower any further, is that they bought Instagram. For those of y'all that don't know, I'm pretty sure y'all should know. Every time you log into your Instagram, look at the bottom of the screen. It says Instagram from Facebook. It's got a picture of Instagram right in the center. Right at the bottom, it says Instagram from who? Facebook, right? So we look at what they did to attain wealth, since they can't be selling commodities and groceries and cleaning products and candy and all that. They decided to make money off of the internet, right? So now we got agriculture and our basic needs. Then we got money that people make off of software and Amazon and the internet and software, right? All stuff that we could have access to in the palm of our hands, right? Again, These people are billionaires. There's many more that I could have mentioned. Where does that leave you and I? Now, I'm going to also cover black billionaires, right? Only about 6 of them in the U.S. I think there's like 615. There's 615 billionaires in the U.S. So let's look at them real quick. Then I'll come back to my main point. First is Robert F. Smith, right? Richest black man in the country. For those of y'all that don't know who he is, he's the billionaire that went to Morehouse's graduation and pledged to pay for all of their student loan debts. Next is David Stewart. He worked in a IT service, if I'm not mistaken, that services companies like Citi, companies like Citi, which is CITI, Verizon, and the federal government is clients actually. So kudos to him. Next is Oprah Winfrey, multi-million-dollar lady right there. Big shout out to her. She is the only black and female billionaire in the United States. Next is Michael Jordan, of course, considered to be the greatest basketball player of all time. Now, I know that he's commonly known to be a compulsive gambler and he was really bad with his money, but his net worth now is $1.4 billion. So shout out to him, right? He's getting his cash. And next is Jay-Z, who was the only rapper up to this point that I know that was actually smart about his money and has become the single richest rapper of all time. For those of y'all that don't know, at 50, he bought a company called Tidal for $56 million in 2015, and it just exploded, taking him all the way into that halfway point. And then he bought shares and stock in Sprint, and that took him over that that hump. And now he's literally the richest rapper in the world. He also owns, Rockaware, and I think he also owns an alcohol, like a cognac, I think. Big shout out to him. And then the newest billionaire is my personal favorite, huge fan, Kanye West. Has a net worth of $1.3 billion. Aside from being an accomplished rapper, he has a streetwear brand called Yeezy, and that company just took him and he excelled with that company, and people are still buying like a t-shirt for $200, $300 just based off of the name, which I think, instead of hating on the man, I think that that's the greatest way to market. You know what I'm saying? One of the greatest quotes that I ever heard from Kanye is that they're buying the brand. You know what I'm saying? Of course, it's just a white t-shirt, but they're buying the brand. Now, would I buy it? As big as a Kanye fan as I am, I would never buy a shirt for, especially if it was a white t-shirt. I think I probably drop, like, the most I'd drop for is like $5, right? But there are people out there that are willing to pay for that, right? And so going back to he figured it out. He going back to that principal rule that I mentioned at the very beginning of the show. Money is what people are willing to pay for. You know what I'm saying? So he literally built that brand knowing that this stuff is going to be super simple. It's not going to be made out of gold or something that's more valuable than the other. No. What you think Chanel and all these other big brands, Gucci and Louis Vuitton, you know what I'm saying? It's not like their stuff is made out of whatever. Like, I always hear this all the time. Oh, it's the finest X, Y, and Z, the finest leather, the finest robes, silk and linen, whatever. All that's bull, all right? Real talk. You're being misled, you're being faked out, and you've been had, and you are paying for it straight out of your pocket, right? Because somebody else who's on the other side of the transaction that you're making thought about you and had you in mind and thought to themselves, if I could flash my merchandise the best and make it the loudest, you would be willing to pay whatever price for my product. What does that look like? All right. In music videos, what do you see rappers floss all the time? Jewelry, cars, women, and clothes. Now, depending on who the rapper is, sometimes it'll be weapons, but those are essentially 4 that you commonly see in music videos and that are talked about in music, period. Right? Whenever y'all see TV, whenever y'all watch TV shows, what do they have? Oh, the finest blank purse, or the finest linens, or you always see some rich CEO dude in a bathrobe with a coffee mug, feeding his dog like steak or something. You know what I'm saying? They figured out if we can put our products on the big screen, people would be willing to pay whatever kind of price I set on it because I'm setting the price and they're going to meet me there. And if you think that is not true, look at the medium that you're using to listen to this podcast right now. You get what I'm saying? Now, that's not to say that as the average person, you can't win. No. But the best way to get up into that upper middle class and to excel your community up is to invest among yourselves. Now, obviously, there are communities that are totally impoverished and not given the proper access to wealth. That's the most common thing that I hear, that we're not given access to many things, right? But I'm going to make this clear to everybody right now when I say this. You're not going to get access to wealth. It's not going to be handed to you. Things aren't going to be put in place to be for you. So what do you got to do? Go out and get it. If you know that the system is not for you, you got to make moves to outplay the system or to use the system to your own benefit. If you really want to win and help your community win while you're doing it, stop buying at Walmart. For real. You get what I mean? That's essentially what we're going to be covering in our next episode. So make sure that y'all tune in, because as excited as I was to get into this episode, I'm even more excited about my next episode. So now that we're about to end the show, I appreciate y'all listening. I hope that you really did learn something, and I'm hoping that you'll learn and take something with you so that your view of money won't be a negative thing, but you'll be so much smarter and so much better off that after this, you're going to move differently with your money. So thank you for tuning in. Make sure you listen to part 2 of Wait Till I Get My Money Right, which is going to be the name of this episode. And I appreciate y'all tuning in. Like I said, much love to all. Peace.